Coming up today, Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo fires a strong warning at Japan for its continued attempts to distort history after Tokyo makes wild claims that it ruled part of Korea more than 1,500 years ago. Visiting US Defense Chief Ashton Carter will hold talks with his South Korean counterpart, Han Min-koo, in Seoul on Friday. All eyes are on whether Carter will bring up the possible deployment of a controversial US missile defense system. Plus, North Korea holds its first major parliamentary session of the year, but leader Kim Jong-un fails to attend for the second consecutive time. These stories and more coming right up. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, April 10th here in Seoul. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, Korea's Prime Minister is urging the Japanese government to stop distorting history. Lee Wan-koo says Seoul and Tokyo should be cooperating for the sake of their economies and stability in the region. His remarks came after the recent discovery that Tokyo has been using a name based on a false historical theory to describe Korean cultural artifacts. Choi Yoo-sun starts us off.
At an unscheduled meeting with reporters on Thursday, Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo warned Tokyo it cannot conceal the truth about history, and Japan will eventually face a stern assessment of its past. He added Korea and Japan will have to approach the history issue based on objective truth for the future of bilateral relations.
Korea and Japan should cooperate when it comes to security and the economy. Our relations should be sound, but there cannot be a distortion of history, and under no circumstances will Korea accept it.
This comes as Japan's State Cultural Agency, as well as school history texts, were found to use the name Mimana, pronounced Imna in Korean, when referring to Korean cultural properties. It is the name of a military outpost that's part of a disputed Japanese theory that Japan ruled over the southern part of Korea between the 4th and 6th centuries. Referring to Korea and Japan's agreement in 2010 to stop using the name after concluding the theory was incorrect, the Prime Minister deflected the criticism that Seoul is not doing enough to correct the issue on the diplomatic front.
I don't agree with the criticism about low-key diplomacy. We are doing the best we can within a reasonable, appropriate, and strategic framework.
Lee also said the Education Ministry will be tasked with clarifying the truth behind the theory. Korea's Foreign Ministry, meanwhile, expressed regret over Japan's recently approved middle school textbooks containing the controversial theory and said it will soon call for a revision. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
US Defense Secretary Ashton Carter is in Seoul for talks with South Korean officials on how to counteract North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. One of his first things that he did upon his arrival in South Korea on Thursday afternoon was to thank the American soldiers stationed here, stressing Washington's security commitment to the Asia-Pacific region. He said the US would be deploying more stealth fighters, bombers, and several new ship classes to the region from now on.
A lot of our newer capabilities, the ones that we're making investments in, are going to be flowing into this theater because of the importance we attach to it.
Carter will meet with South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-koo on this Friday. The two officials are expected to discuss coordination against North Korean threats and provocations. But most attention is on whether Carter and Han will, either officially or unofficially, talk about deploying a US anti-ballistic missile system called THAAD to South Korea. This has become a highly controversial topic as China and Russia oppose the possible move, saying it would destabilize regional security. North Korea held its first major parliamentary meeting of the year on Thursday. The session was not attended by leader Kim Jong-un, but a number of decisions were ratified, including a slight personnel change to the regime's powerful National Defense Commission. Son Jong-in has more.
The third session of the 13th Supreme People's Assembly brought together nearly 650 deputies from the regime to finalize budget issues and legislative affairs. The North State-run Korean Central News Agency reported that the Assembly decided to raise this year's budget by 5.5% compared to last year. It also decided to raise its investment in culture and science technology, and most notably in the forest industry, reflecting Kim Jong-un's earlier emphasis on developing the country's forestation sector. They also set aside 15.9% of the total budget for defense, the same as the previous year. There was also a change in North Korea's power structure. Kim Chun-seop, a Workers' Party secretary in charge of the border province of Chagangdo, was appointed to the 10-person National Defense Commission chaired by Kim Jong-un. He replaces Park Do-chun, a party official secretary overseeing the nation's missile and nuclear development. Kim Jong-un was absent from the session, the fifth of its kind since he took power in late 2011. He was also a no-show at the previous session in September last year when he was believed to be recovering from ankle surgery. The reason for his absence this time was not immediately confirmed, but Kim was spotted earlier wearing a gauze and a bandage on his right wrist. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's central bank has slashed this year's economic growth outlook, citing slow exports and the sluggish pace of recovery we're feeling here. But the Bank of Korea, as widely expected, held its key rate steady, saying the already record low rate of 1.75% was enough to support growth for the time being at least. Shin Se-min reports.
The Bank of Korea has cut its growth outlook for the Korean economy this year by 0.3 percentage points to barely over 3%. Central Bank Governor Lee Ju-yeol said that the downgrade is due to weak exports and slow growth.
The lowered forecast comes from a weaker than expected GDP in the last quarter of 2014 and lower consumer price growth in the first quarter of this year.
The central bank also slashed its inflation forecast for this year to less than 1%, from 1.9% in January, with low global oil prices that are expected to fall even further. The central bank governor said that so far, the domestic economy has shown few signs of improvement, but maintained that consumer sentiment has not yet recovered. But the central bank left its key rate unchanged at 1.75%, saying that the current rate is low enough to prop up economic growth. Some experts, however, say that there is room for the BOK to do more.
The current rate is not low enough to boost the domestic economy. The central bank should take action by lowering it even more if the actual growth rate fails to meet the bank's outlook.
But not everyone agrees. Some experts say that the economic recovery can't be driven by the interest rate alone, and long-term structural reforms are also needed to stimulate the domestic spending and investment. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, the wait is finally over. Samsung's latest smartphones, the Galaxy S6 and the Galaxy S6 Edge, go on global release on this Friday. The Korean firm says the device's chic design features and new mobile payment system will create new value for its customers. Connie Kim reports.
Samsung Electronics' highly anticipated pair of Galaxy S6 smartphones is aiming to lure consumers with sleek features and new value when it hits shelves in more than 20 countries on Friday. Shin Jong-gyun, the head of Samsung Electronics' mobile division, said that new value refers to the device's wireless charging feature and the mobile payment system, Samsung Pay, which he says will create a completely new culture. The Korean tech giant smartphone also features a chic design. The S6 has an all-metal and glass body, while the Galaxy S6 Edge takes it up a notch with a screen that bends over the edge of the device. For design-conscious consumers, Samsung also discarded its removable battery for a more sleek design. Market watchers expect the new Galaxy S6 series to achieve record sales.
40 million Galaxy S5s and 46 million Galaxy S4s were sold in the first year after their release. We are expecting sales of around 55 million Galaxy S6s, especially with the unique design, considering that there will be no competing smartphones in the first half of the year. There will be demand for such high-end devices.
Samsung sold 73 million smartphones in the fourth quarter last year, while Apple sold nearly 75 million iPhones. Samsung's profit last year dropped 37% on year. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, Iran's supreme leader has warned the world against getting too carried away with the recently agreed framework deal on Tehran's nuclear program, saying there's no guarantee the deal will be finalized by the June 30th deadline. In a statement on his website on Thursday, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said nothing had been done yet and there was nothing binding as a result of reaching the framework agreement. However, he did stress that all economic sanctions on Iran would have to be lifted on the day any final agreement is signed, and that military sites would be strictly off limits to foreign inspectors. Italy has been rocked by a shooting at a courthouse in Milan that left 3 people dead. The shooter, identified as Claudio Giardiello, was captured as he tried to flee on a motorcycle. Police say the suspect was a defendant in a bankruptcy case. The people killed were a co-defendant, his former lawyer, and a bankruptcy court judge. The incident has raised questions about how the man was able to smuggle a gun into the fortress-like courthouse, given that visitors are required to pass through metal detectors. Now, have you ever heard of pumashi? Probably not, as it's something not many Koreans are familiar with either. It's an old-fashioned idea about resource sharing in small communities that's begun to fade with the demands of modern lifestyle. But there are efforts to revive the spirit and share it with others around the world. Our Gwon-swa files this report from a special event at Korea's National Assembly.
A group of high-level delegates from Korea, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand came together at the National Assembly for a forum on mutual cooperation. In Korea, the concept is known as pumashi, and is what's behind Koreans' traditional way of life. Village residents would get together, pool their resources, and help one another when they could. These communal actions are much like those in other countries around the world, including Canada. Barry Devlin, a Canadian parliamentarian, says the parallel concept in North America is a barn raising, which for many evokes the idea of a community coming together to help one of its members.
100 years ago or more in Canada and the United States, in farm communities, when one family needed a new barn, a building for the animals, the whole town would come together to help.
H2O, the organizer of Thursday's event, has a special connection with Canada. Group members traveled to the country last year to thank Canadian veterans for their service in the Korean War. Through the Thank You from Korea project, the group seeks to give back to the 21 United Nations members that fought alongside Korean soldiers in the war. The Canadian veterans said they were deeply touched by the meaningful act. The pumashi spirit has been at the center of these projects and will contribute to creating further bonds.
We'd like to develop this movement to other countries in the world to keep the sustainability of the world village and to keep the world village as a peace village.
Thursday's event was the first global pumashi forum, and more are planned, with organizers hoping to revive the valuable but vanishing spirit of pumashi and share it with the world. Gwon-swa, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Have a great weekend, and thanks as always for watching, and we do hope to see you at the same time on Monday. Goodbye.